The new Media Gallery in New Westminster features interactive exhibitions from artists across the world, with their current exhibition, MERNs, that's short for mirror neurons, having formed to answer the question of how machines perceive and respond to a diverse audience of spectators. Take Uncanny Mirror by Mario Klingman, for example. It utilizes biometric facial markers via digital camera to create an ever-changing visual representation of the exhibition's visitors. When a spectator approaches the piece, each aspect of their appearance is fed into its computer, which then combines the features of the current subject along with those of past subjects to create a distorted reflection. The piece drew heavily from Klingman's curiosity into how human figures and features are visually perceived by machines. However, this concept of spectator recognition also runs the risk of exposing biases that may not have been intended. In 2015, Google's image recognition software developed a trend of mistakenly identifying black individuals as gorillas, prompting an apology from Google. 3 years later, in 2018, Wired conducted an investigation and found that rather than fixing the problem, Google had instead removed the term gorilla from the software's database entirely. Your initial instinct might be to chalk this up to corporate irresponsibility, but the 2016 study To Predict and Serve by Christian Lum and William Isaac opens with the story of a black individual named Robert McDaniel. McDaniel was visited by Chicago authorities when predictive policing software flagged him as possibly being involved in a future violent crime. Although Lum and Isaac's research showed no substantial difference in drug usage across different races, the software still targeted people of color twice as often as white individuals, putting the algorithms used under heavy criticism. The culprit? The software was trained on datasets from police arrest records, further perpetuating the bias present in police forces across America. And pause. Okay, so while a certain level of algorithmic bias is evident in both corporate and government institutions, biased datasets were just one possible source. We wanted to know exactly where it was coming from, so we sat down with Angel Chung, a Stanford-educated assistant computer science professor at Simon Fraser University.
And then there's people who, decide, okay, am I gonna release this product now, or am I gonna test it? And so a lot of times people don't really understand this entire chain. And because there's a lot of people involved and this whole chain, sometimes it's not apparent whether a small decision you make about, okay, am I gonna go out and collect data, like say...
All right, let's jump ahead just a little.
A lot of the time is accidental. And I think most people in this pipeline are not malicious. They're not really wanting it to be like something to happen, to have negative consequences.
Wait, right there. Rewind.
A lot of the time is accidental. And I think most people in this pipeline are not malicious.
So whether subconscious or not, it can also be an accidental addition on the part of those programming the algorithm. But if we know that bias is often present, why don't we just get rid of it through rigorous testing or peer review?
I guess one thing is that bias is not necessarily bad.
So bias can be a good thing? Okay, let's see what she has to say.
You actually want your machine learning algorithms and your data to have some bias. And I guess an example of this is that, if you want to classify whether something is a banana or not, bananas are usually yellow. Or, there are variants that may be green, or when it's rotten, it's black, but usually they're yellow. And you want to have that association. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is that bias is not always bad. And that's one reason it's really hard to quantify and to identify the bias that we don't necessarily want.
Okay, so if bias can result from bad data sets or even just accidentally during the design pipeline, what can we do about it?
Maybe sometimes you don't necessarily want to erase the bias in your data because what they are teaching you or telling you about is the current biases that people have. And what we want to do as a society is not necessarily just remove these biases from our data, but potentially try to think of how do we, as a society, grow and then have the people not have these biased attitudes. And maybe by not having the biases in the data, we can project a future where people are less biased, and then we can encourage people to be less biased. But at the same time, I think it's important to just keep the data sometimes as it is so we can study the current bias.
Bias is a collection of assumptions based on past experiences, and just like with Uncanny Mirror, these assumptions help us to reach a more finalized product. But what's important is that we're staying aware of these assumptions and understanding where they're coming from. At the end of the day, that's all bias is, assumptions. And that matters because, well, not every banana is yellow.